With the death of the Emperor and his disciple Darth Vader, the galaxy finally seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The victory of the Rebel Alliance brought a sense of renewal and hope, but also a power vacuum that quickly triggered political disputes. The Senate, with the fervent support of the rebels, began to reorganize itself in order to restore the balance and values of the old republic. However, the transition would not be smooth. Some admirals believed that the military should take control during the first moments of reconstruction, arguing that this would guarantee the stability needed to avoid further collapses. The idea seemed logical to some, but deeply threatening to others. The debates quickly turned into tensions. The Senate, which was seeking to resume its central role in the governance of the galaxy, found itself challenged by military resistance. The Rebel Alliance, which had fought so hard to overthrow the Empire, now faced a new threat of authoritarianism, but this time from within. As the admirals consolidated their forces, it became clear that this would not just be a political clash. The military began to move in, occupying strategic posts and intimidating the Republic's allies. When words were no longer enough, the conflict exploded, plunging the galaxy into a new state of civil war. The conflict came to a head when the military launched a devastating attack on the Rebel Alliance's main base. There, Leia and Luke were caught completely off guard. The offensive was swift and brutal, with squadrons attacking both on the ground and in the skies. Luke, assuming his leadership role, organized a makeshift resistance, defending his position with all his might. Leia, for her part, showed the same courage as always, guiding the rebel troops and trying to prevent a total collapse. However, the military's numerical superiority seemed insurmountable, and the siege was tightening all the time. In the midst of the chaos, Leia found herself cornered by an enemy troop. A blaster shot passed inches from her body, and it looked like the next one would be fatal. Then a white glow cut through the air, deflecting the shot. A lightsaber, wielded by none other than Ahsoka Tano, illuminated the room. When Ahsoka heard about the fall of the Empire, she decided to visit her former master's children in the capital. Her timing was perfect. The surprise of her arrival breathed new life into the rebels, and she quickly took up a position alongside Luke, fighting off the military soldiers with the dexterity of a veteran Jedi. After stabilizing the initial situation, Luke suggested a daring course of action. She and Luke would infiltrate the military command's flagship and capture the admirals responsible for the attack. It was a risky mission, but it could end the conflict decisively. With the support of Leia and the rebels, Ahsoka and Luke boarded a ship and carried out the raid. The battle was intense, but their experience and bond with the Force gave them the edge they needed. They managed to capture the military leaders, weakening their forces and ending the conflict. Once again, the Jedi demonstrated their importance as guardians of peace in the galaxy. The victory brought up an issue that Leia could no longer ignore: the need for the presence of the Jedi Order for the security of the Republic. In a frank conversation with Luke, she expressed her concern. Peace would only be lasting if the Jedi returned to their role as defenders of balance. However, Luke was reluctant. He didn't feel ready to take on such a huge responsibility, especially after everything he had learned about the Jedi Order's past mistakes. Doubt consumed him, and he feared repeating the same mistakes that had led to their destruction. During this period, Leia and Ahsoka developed an unexpected connection. Ahsoka, with her critical view of the old Jedi Order and her memories of Anakin Skywalker, shared stories that Leia had never heard before. The idea that her father was not only Darth Vader, but also a great Jedi, began to change Leia's perspective on her own heritage. This exchange of experiences strengthened the bond between the two, and Leia came to see Ahsoka as an indispensable ally. It was then that Leia suggested that Ahsoka help Luke rebuild the Jedi Order. However, Ahsoka hesitated. As someone who had left the Jedi Order because she disagreed with its tenets, she wondered if she was really the right person for this mission. Rebuilding something she herself had abandoned seemed contradictory, but the idea of shaping a new order, free from the mistakes of the past, began to emerge as a possibility. Ahsoka's doubts echoed Luke's uncertainties, and they both needed to find answers not just for the galaxy, but for themselves. The New Republic seemed to be facing a new beginning, but the shadows of the past still loomed, ready to influence the steps of its leaders and the Jedi. In this moment of uncertainty, Leia's proposal ignited something deep within Ahsoka. Rebuilding the Jedi Order was not just a political or military issue, but a spiritual challenge. Ahsoka knew that the mistakes of the past could not be ignored. The old order had lost itself in dogmas and rigid rules that had contributed to its downfall. However, she also recognized that the Jedi represented something greater than any flawed system. They were the guardians of the Force, those who brought balance to chaos. As she reflected, Ahsoka realized that perhaps her reluctance was not just doubt, but also fear of facing the legacy of Anakin, her former master. Deep down, perhaps this was her chance to honor her history and shape something truly new, together with Luke and Leia. The galaxy still needed hope, and the Jedi could be the light that would guide this uncertain path. On one of his days of meditation, Luke felt the Force manifest itself in a different way. A light breeze drifted through the room and, when he opened his eyes, he saw the ghost of Yoda. The old master had a serene countenance, but his words carried weight. Reconsider, you must, young Skywalker. It's not just your legacy. Necessary, the Jedi still are. Luke, surprised, listened intently as Yoda explained that the balance in the galaxy depended on his leadership. A new path, create you can. The old, repeat you must not, said Yoda, reinforcing that it was his responsibility to build something that honored the past, but that corrected the mistakes that led to the fall of the old order. Touched by Yoda's words, Luke decided to take on the responsibility of rebuilding the Jedi Order and continuing his family's legacy. He knew it wouldn't be an easy task, but he was determined. He sought out Ahsoka Tano and invited her to help him on this mission, at least for the first few years, ensuring that she could follow her own path afterwards if she wished. Ahsoka, although hesitant, saw Luke's request as an opportunity to contribute to a new order, more in line with the true values of the Force. She accepted, but on the condition that the changes were significant and that old mistakes were not repeated. With the idea consolidated, Luke, Leia, and Ahsoka went to the Senate on Coruscant to request authorization to resume the Jedi Order in the Old Temple. The Skywalkers' recent achievements and Ahsoka's invaluable help ensured a warm reception. Leia, now an influential figure in the Senate, presented the request eloquently, and the senators, still grateful for the Empire's defeat, promptly authorized the rebuilding of the temple. This decision marked a historic moment, as it signaled renewed confidence in the Jedi as guardians of peace. When Luke and Ahsoka entered the Jedi Temple, they were both overcome with emotion. For Luke, it was the first time he had set foot in the place where so many masters and knights had walked. He felt a deep connection with the environment, as if echoes of the past were alive there. For Ahsoka, the experience was a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. She remembered the times before the fall, when the temple was vibrant and full of life. Walking through the destroyed corridors, they both felt the weight of history and the responsibility to honor it. As they explored what remained of the temple, Ahsoka took on the role of guide. She pointed to structures that were still recognizable, such as the main hall and the old Jedi Council chambers. "We used to gather here to meditate," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. Luke listened carefully, absorbing every detail. "Ahsoka, all this will be rebuilt. Not as it was before, but as it must be now," Luke replied, determined. The Force seemed to whisper in every corner, as if it approved of their presence there. With the temple under reconstruction, Luke and Ahsoka began to lay the foundations of the new Jedi Order. Luke decided that the teachings of the Force would be the main focus, setting aside rigid dogmas that had restricted the Jedi in the past. Ahsoka supported this stance, as she had always believed that the old order had become lost in its own rules. Together, they planned a more flexible structure that would allow the Jedi a deeper understanding of the Force as their ultimate guide. Among the changes, the Jedi would no longer be deprived of human needs. They could marry, have families, and raise their children without being separated from them. Luke believed that the old model had contributed to the downfall of the Order. For him, the ability to love and connect was one of the greatest gifts of the Force, and repressing it was a mistake that should not be repeated. Ahsoka, for her part, agreed and saw this approach as a sign that the new order really was aligned with balance. Luke also saw the events of the past as part of a great reform guided by the Force. He believed that the destruction of the Old Order was a natural consequence of his own mistakes and that this was part of the Chosen One's prophecy. Both he, as Anakin's son, and Ahsoka, as Anakin's Padawan, felt they had an important role to play in this rebuilding process. Both assumed this responsibility with a mixture of reverence and determination. It was decided that Luke would be the Grand Master, in charge of training the new Jedi and administering the Order. Ahsoka, for her part, agreed to be the second member of the new Jedi Council, now as Master. Her main mission would be to travel the galaxy in search of young Force sensitives. This would not only allow her to maintain the freedom she had always cherished, but would also strengthen the Order's bond with different cultures and traditions in the galaxy. Meanwhile, Leia, now using the surname Skywalker, was becoming an increasingly influential figure on the political scene as the Senator of Alderaan. She played a crucial role as Luke's greatest ally in the Senate, serving as a bridge between the new Jedi Order and the galaxy's political leaders. Her diplomatic skills and connection to the Force made her indispensable to the success of this new era, marking the beginning of a promising chapter for the galaxy. Years passed and the new Jedi Order grew impressively. Thanks to the tireless work of Ahsoka Tano, who traveled the far reaches of the galaxy searching for young Force sensitives, the Order prospered in both numbers and political relevance. Luke's presence as Jedi Grand Master was a guarantee of peace and stability for the Republic, while the renewed teachings attracted a new generation of Jedi, committed not only to tradition, but to building a better future. Leia achieved the position of Chancellor of the Republic, a feat that seemed guided by the Force itself. Her benevolent leadership and her bond with the Force made her the perfect choice to unite the star systems under the banner of peace and cooperation. With Luke as Jedi Grand Master and Leia as Chancellor, the Skywalkers, direct heirs of the Force, assumed the two most important positions in the galaxy, symbolizing the balance between political and spiritual power. The Jedi Order, now restructured, included experienced survivors of the original Order, many of whom became part of the new Jedi Council. In addition, an impressive number of young Padawans were recruited. It was as if the Force was promoting a large-scale rebirth, ensuring that the Jedi had the resources and talents they needed to face the challenges of a new era. This abundance brought hope and renewal to the Temple on Coruscant. Under the principles established by Luke, the new Jedi Order flourished. The Jedi Library was reconstituted, once again becoming a center of learning and wisdom. Jedi of all ages devoted themselves to study and training, while Luke coordinated everything impeccably. His flexible leadership style and focus on the Force as the ultimate guide allowed the Order to adapt to the new times and become more resilient. Flexibility in Jedi dogma has brought renewed strength to the Order. The freedom to question and reflect on ancient teachings allowed the Jedi to develop a more comprehensive view of the dangers of the galaxy. Without the philosophical rigidity of the Old Order, the Jedi were more alert and prepared, with a more authentic connection to the Force. This freedom also allowed the Jedi to live full lives, including relationships and families, which strengthened their emotional and spiritual bonds. The relationship between Luke, Leia, and Ahsoka became stronger and stronger, bringing them closer together as a real family. They often felt the presence of Anakin Skywalker, as if he were watching over them and guiding them through the Force. This bond was a constant reminder that, despite his mistakes, Anakin was also part of the legacy that now thrived in his hands. Luke devoted years to rebuilding the Jedi Order and perfecting his skills. He tirelessly studied the ancient Jedi scriptures and practiced techniques that had been forgotten for centuries. His commitment was total, and his search for balance led him to immerse himself deeply in the Force, developing a connection that few had achieved before him. He spent hours secluded in the temple's meditation chambers, where he often received spiritual visits from ancient masters such as Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, and his father, Anakin. Luke kept his doors open for Padawans and Jedi Knights to come to him with questions or for inspiration. His dedication was an example to all, and his leadership transformed the Jedi Temple into a true center of learning and evolution. Luke's excellence as a Jedi was recognized throughout the galaxy. His connection with the Force, his combat skills, and his maturity as a leader made him a living legend. He came to be regarded by many as the greatest Jedi of all time, a title he bore with humility, aware of the responsibility he had to rebuild the Order and preserve balance. Until, during one of his meditations, Luke felt something different. It wasn't the familiar presence of his former masters, but a dark, powerful, and unsettling energy. A strong disturbance in the Force disrupted his concentration, bringing with it a sense of imminent danger. He knew that this mysterious presence represented a new challenge, perhaps the greatest he would face on his journey as a Jedi Grand Master. Luke felt a chill as he identified the dark energy that was disturbing him during his meditation. It was an unmistakable presence, something he had felt before, in the dark days when he confronted Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine. That was Sith energy. The Force seemed to be warning him of imminent danger, something that threatened all the work he had done in rebuilding the Jedi Order. Luke knew that this sensation could not be ignored, for the balance of the galaxy depended on his vigilance. Among the survivors of Order 66 and the relentless persecution of the Imperial Inquisitors, some Jedi had endured unimaginable trauma. The years of suffering and isolation, combined with a loss of hope, caused many of these individuals to lose faith in the Jedi Order and the Force. These straying Jedi began to be drawn to the dark side, seduced by its promise of power and revenge on those who had destroyed them. Little by little, they distanced themselves from the light, becoming vulnerable to the evil influences that surrounded them. Palpatine, even after his death, continued to spread his corruption. Like a Force ghost, he wandered the galaxy, identifying Force-sensitive individuals who already bore the mark of suffering and hatred. With his subtle and persuasive manipulations, he planted the seeds of the dark side, feeding the doubts and resentments of these lost Jedi. Palpatine knew that by strengthening the dark side within them, he could create new allies for his cause, even on the other side of existence. The result of this influence was devastating. One by one, these Jedi plunged into the dark side of the Force, slowly being transformed into agents of darkness. When they were ready, Palpatine began to manifest himself directly to them, appearing as a shadowy figure and guiding them even deeper into the shadows. Under his guidance, the Sith returned, rebuilding their ranks from the fragments left by the old Jedi Order. Darkness was growing again, threatening everything Luke and the others had built. Among these new Sith, the ancient rule of two was resurrected. Each of the corrupted Jedi found a Force-sensitive disciple to train, further expanding the reach of the dark side. Palpatine, now as a manipulative entity, coordinated several nuclei of two Sith in different regions of the galaxy. This decentralization made the dark side even more dangerous, as its actions were simultaneous and unpredictable. The emergence of these nuclei was proof that the dark side was getting organized again. When this critical mass of Sith was hit, Luke felt a powerful disturbance in the Force. The energy was so intense that he immediately sought out Ahsoka to share his concern. Together, they took the feeling to the Jedi Council, which was deeply alarmed. Still not fully understanding the threat, the Council recognized that something terrible was in the making. They knew that only the Jedi could face this new threat and protect the fragile balance of the galaxy. The responsibility placed on the new order was immense, and time was short. Ahsoka was on a mission to the planet Corbin, investigating reports of mysterious disappearances. The information indicated that ships were disappearing in the planet's orbit, and the Force seemed disturbed in that region. During her investigation, she found evidence of ancient Sith activity and realized that the site had a strong connection to the dark side. Her sensitivity to the Force alerted her that she was being watched, but before she could react, she realized that she had been led into an ambush. It was a meticulously planned trap. Two Sith emerged from the shadows, an imposing master with a red lightsaber and his apprentice, young and agile, who seemed determined to prove his worth. Ahsoka immediately activated her white sabers, ready to fight. She sensed Palpatine's presence behind this trap, as if the ghost of the former Emperor had guided the movements of the two Sith. The intention was clear: to weaken the Jedi Council by attacking one of its most important members. The battle began, and Ahsoka's experience was tested like never before. The confrontation was intense and unbalanced. While Ahsoka was skilled and agile, the two Sith worked together to exploit her vulnerabilities. The Sith Master focused on powerful frontal attacks, while the apprentice used quick, stealthy tactics to flank Ahsoka. She managed to hold out for a while, but the pressure was enormous. Combining their forces, the Sith began to gain the upper hand, surrounding her and forcing her to retreat. Her precise movements were being outmatched by her opponent's brutal coordination. At a critical moment, the Sith Master managed to damage one of Ahsoka's lightsabers, disabling it. The apprentice then took advantage of the opening to strike her leg with a precise blow, which compromised her mobility. Ahsoka tried to fight back with her remaining lightsaber, but a quick move by her master threw it away. Now unarmed and wounded, she was at the mercy of her enemies. The Sith Master raised his saber, ready to strike the final blow. Before the saber could reach Ahsoka, the Sith Master was thrown violently against a wall by an invisible force. Luke Skywalker had arrived. He had sensed the danger Ahsoka was facing and came to her aid. With his saber activated and a determined expression, Luke faced the two Sith, ready to take them on. Ahsoka, relieved but still wounded, watched as the Jedi Grand Master took up the fight. The battle between Luke and the two Sith was fierce. He demonstrated his mastery of the lightsaber and his deep connection to the Force. In one swift movement, Luke managed to disarm the apprentice, cutting off his arm. The young man cried out in pain and retreated, while the Sith Master redoubled his efforts to defeat Luke. The intensity of the fight seemed to increase with every moment, with quick blows and calculated movements echoing through the chamber. With a precise sequence, Luke finally defeated the Sith Master, disarming him and driving his saber into his chest with a decisive blow. The apprentice, though wounded, tried to resist, but Luke, with his Jedi calm, offered redemption. "You can still return to the light. The Force is your ally, not the shadows," he said. However, the apprentice chose to flee, disappearing into the shadows of Corbin. Luke didn't pursue him, allowing him to escape. He then turned his attention to Ahsoka, helping her to her feet and returning with her to the Jedi Temple. Back at the temple, Luke sought answers in deep meditation. He connected to the Force, seeking guidance from his mentors. It was then that a dark presence emerged, breaking the silence of his meditation. The ghost of Palpatine appeared before him, an evil smile on his face. "Do you think you can stop me, Skywalker? I never stopped influencing the Republic. The war has just begun, and the Sith, acting in the shadows, will win. There is no escaping the destiny I have created," declared Palpatine, his voice echoing like poison. Luke remained calm, even in the presence of his old enemy. "You can manipulate the shadows, Palpatine, but the light will always prevail. The Jedi Order is ready to face you, in whatever form you take," Luke replied firmly. He felt the Force flowing through him, a living energy that strengthened his resolve. Palpatine laughed darkly before disappearing, but the message was clear. The battle was far from over. Opening his eyes, Luke knew that dark times lay ahead. The new Jedi Order would face greater challenges than he had ever imagined. However, he also knew that he would not face them alone. With Ahsoka, Leia, and the other Jedi at his side, he was determined to protect the galaxy and maintain the balance of the Force, whatever lay ahead.